Hello, everybody, and welcome to the One Mind Dharma podcast. My name is Matthew Sokolov, and right off the bat, if you want to learn more about what we do and what we offer, you can visit oneminddharma.com. If you're interested in individual mindfulness counseling sessions, you can visit oneminddharma.com/coaching or my personal website at themindfulcounselor.me. And if you have any questions about meditation or mindfulness or today's talk, you can email me at matthew@oneminddharma.com. And I do want to apologize in advance today if we have any technical issues. We're using a new program to record, and we've already had to scrap one version of this talk. So I'm hoping that the second time works a little better. So anyways, with that out of the way, I don't know why I share the topic of the talk like it's going to be a surprise. If you're listening on a podcast player or on YouTube, it's in the title. But I wanted to talk about karma kind of as a practical, pragmatic practice. So today I'm going to leave kind of some of the very foundational pieces of karma in Buddhism as it relates to rebirth and whatnot, and focus on the idea of karma or kama as a practice, as something that we can actually understand and utilize our understanding in our own lives. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a large chunk of the Buddhist teachings on karma that are being left out here. And that's as it relates to rebirth and ending the cycle of samsara. So with that being said, we're going to jump in with, of course, what the word actually means. And the word karma, it's one of the few Sanskrit words I actually use, comes from the Pali word kama. And you hear these similar languages a lot. Like we use the word dharma, as in one mind dharma, whereas a lot of my teachers and the readings I use the word dhamma, the Pali word. They're the same thing, same meaning, same word, two different languages. But the word karma really can be understood as intentional action. And what we understand as karma is this simple law or teaching of cause and effect, that when we act intentionally, there's a result, there's a consequence. And I think sometimes the word consequence has a negative connotation, but there's a result or a consequence. This quote from Sakyong Mipam says, "Karma moves in two directions. If we act virtuously, the seed we plant will result in happiness. If we act non-virtuously, suffering results." And that's kind of simple, but I think it really gets at the essence of this idea of karma. When we act virtuously, and we'll discuss what that means, we plant the seeds of happiness both in ourselves and in others. If we act non-virtuously, suffering results, both in ourselves and in others. So we can think about it pretty simply, and how we intentionally act has the power to impact the freedom or suffering of ourselves, of others, not just human beings, of course. So let's take a really simple example. If I intentionally say something to bring another person down, the result is that they might feel brought down. They might feel anger, they might feel hurt, they might feel less than. If I say something to somebody else that's encouraging and loving and kind and comes from the heart, it might lift them up and relieve some of their suffering. And we can think about it with ourselves as well, right? If I go out and get a little exercise today and go for a walk, I'm going to have a little more energy in my body. It's going to be good for my heart health. Maybe I'll get some vitamin D from the sun. There's effects of making that decision. In the Buddha's time, this was a bit of a radical teaching. The Buddha taught that it's not by birth, but by karma, that we become a Brahma or an outcast. Or that is to say, it's not by birth that we become a noble person, but by our actions, by our intentional actions. And I find this very encouraging in my own life. It's by our actions that we become more noble in the sense of Buddhism, in the sense of our path. Not noble as in we're going to have a castle and be royalty, but noble in the sense of not carry any guilt, not carry any shame, not carry suffering, and begin to liberate ourselves and liberate others. So I think it's really important, just a few pieces here before we really jump into how to use this. I think it's important to understand that karma, as defined in Buddhism, really stems from intentional action. So actions that we take with intent. And I'll include speech with this, right? Speech is a form of action. So when we intend and have volition and do something, that's generating karma. And we'll talk in a little bit. I'll go over what about things that are unintentional. A few things that karma, as it's taught in Buddhism, is linear or deterministic. Before the Buddha came about and discovered or taught this path, the Jains had a system of karma somewhat similar, but it was much more linear and deterministic and can be thought of as fate in a sense. I'm not an expert on Jainism, but it seems like in Jainism, the understanding of karma is much more linear. One way that I heard this described was sitting at a meditation retreat with Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Tan Jeff. And someone asked him about the kind of deterministic nature of karma. Like if I behave in this way, I'm just creating my future and there's no free will, or something like that was the question. And he said, the decisions we make today, what we choose to do today, dictates what doors we will have open in the future. So it's not, the teaching of karma isn't that if we behave in a certain way, we fate ourselves into one outcome. But how we behave today gives us different opportunities in the future. We also have the power in how we respond to the results of those karma, those actions. So I'll give an example of that in a bit with something from my own life. Another thing that karma is not is just a kind of naked action or deed, right? It's not, we can't just say something is wholesome or unwholesome or leads us towards liberation or towards suffering just based on the action. It matters the context. Who did it? What's the circumstance? Elizabeth and I and some friends were just at one of my favorite punk bands is on tour. It's their final tour. They've been playing for 40 years. I spent like an hour and a half in the mosh pit, running around, pushing and shoving, and it was so much fun. But it's a really good example of if I ran around pushing and shoving, going a little crazy like that in, say, the DMV or at a park, it would be completely inappropriate. So much like we talk about with wise speech, like is it timely is one of the kind of conditions that we talk about with wise speech, right? Not just are we speaking kindly or hurtfully. But is it timely? Is right now the right time to say that? The same can be said with karma, right? It's not just the deed. It's contextual. Moshing at a punk show, much more appropriate than moshing at the local playground. And then the last thing I think that's important to understand, especially for people like myself who come from a more Judeo-Christian upbringing or background, and I wasn't raised super religious, but just in general, it was what surrounded me, is that karma is not a judgment from a third party. There's no one up there keeping a tally of good karma and bad karma, and you have two columns to see which one outweighs which one. It's more of just a reality of experience, kind of a sense of like a law of the natural world. How we act brings consequences. In the Buddhist suttas or scriptures, karma is described in relation to the kleshas, the afflictions that we might face, volition or intention, tanha or craving, and then impressions or seeds are planted. So what that means, and I didn't come up with an example ahead of time, so stick with me, is let's say, I have a real example. Elizabeth told me yesterday that she asked me a question and I responded super harshly. I have no idea why. It was a very innocent question. I think she was asking for her passport back, but I was about to book a flight. And she asked for her passports back so she could keep them safe, which is reasonable. And I responded in this kind of harsh way. And she said something of like, maybe you could speak to me a little more gently. Like, I didn't mean to, I don't know what she said. Something like that. Something very gentle and very kind. Now, that whole kind of interaction is, she asked me for the passports back. I felt some sort of affliction within myself, some sort of emotional experience. I had volition or intention of like, I don't like the way that feels, so I'm going to say something. I had some craving, right? I wanted to not feel that way. And I behaved by kind of responding in a little bit of a snappy manner. And this seed was kind of planted of, I don't know if anger is the right word, but not of gentleness, not of loving kindness. Meanwhile, she was met with the response of me being a little bit harsh towards her. And I don't know what went on in her mind or experience, but what happened was she responded with great gentleness and kindness. Not accusatory, not rude, very assertive, but also, and true, but also gentle. And then she planted this little seed of like, oh, like something's going on. I'm going to meet it with kindness. And what ended up happening because she responded with such kindness was I said, oh, you're right. I have no idea why I just did that. I apologize. So we can kind of see this process unfolding in our lives, right? We don't just act or speak in a way that is independent of other things. We experience some sort of input. Someone says something or does something, or we read something, or we feel something in the body. And then we kind of have this difficulty or pleasure or pain, and we have some response to it. And that's how the seeds get planted. So as we look at karma and look at the way we behave, the way we act, the way we speak, it's important to take care of the mind. The first and second verse of the Dhammapada, one of the oldest Buddhist teachings, or collection of Buddhist teachings, reads, "Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him, like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows them like a never departing shadow. And what's being pointed out here is that in order to actually act or speak with kindness, with mindfulness, we need to really take care of the mind. It does require, this teaching on karma does require us to begin working on these unwholesome seeds that we have planted and to plant more wholesome seeds. And it's hard. It is hard at times. I've shared a lot in my classes and on this podcast that my kind of go-to harmful response or unhealthy response is anger. And other people have anxiety or depression, whatever it may be. For me, it's anger. And this habit energy grew so strong and so unchecked for so many years by my own, not to beat myself up, but my own neglect or my own inability to deal with it, or a lack of tools or willingness, combination of those things, that when it came time to work on it, I was wondering, why am I lashing out in anger like this? Why am I hurting people around me? I'm trying so hard not to. And the truth was, I had to do a lot of work and continue to have to do a lot of work on my mind and heart. Because those actions and those words that are born out of anger are born from, I don't love the word impure, but are born out of a suffering mind and heart. I was talking with, Elizabeth has a therapist she works with, Emily Todd. I'll include a link to her page. She's awesome. And the article I'm about to mention. She wrote an article. I helped them with some website stuff, and she wrote an article about somatic exercises for anxiety, kind of like exercises one can do themselves for when they find themselves anxious. And I told her, that's so great, because we were talking about, and it goes hand in hand with the karma, that sometimes our karma or the action we can take is in the moment, right? When we're struggling with anxiety, sometimes we have the opportunity to, am I going to take a moment to meditate or do a body scan or do one of these somatic exercises, for example? Or am I going to engage in something unhealthy, like totally avoiding it or pretending it's not there, or whatever it may be, drugs or alcohol? And I'm not bashing anybody. I think everyone knows I am in recovery, but there's healthy and unhealthy ways. And I don't think we need to necessarily split it up into a dichotomy like that, like good karma, bad karma, healthy, unhealthy, suffering, liberation. Because that's a very simplistic and often unhelpful look at karma. But we can consider the ways when we're feeling, say, anxious or angry. What are the effects of how we're responding to it in this moment? If I'm feeling anxious and I sit and meditate, what are the effects of that? If I'm feeling anxious and I, have 5 beers, what are the effects of that, both short-term and long-term? Because the truth is, and I'm not advocating for it, is that if you're experiencing severe anxiety and you drink a few beers, in the short term, you might be freed from some of that anxiety. It's the allure of drugs and alcohol. In the long term, it's not likely to make your anxiety better. It's probably going to make it worse, just as far as the research suggests. On the other hand, when you're having some anxiety and you meditate, it might not be pleasant right away. It might create a little bit of discomfort or dis-ease. But in the long term, research suggests it's going to help lessen that anxiety. So we have kind of karma in that moment. And it's a really good example of what Ton Jeff says of what doors do we have open to us? What do we have available? Because what happens as we make the choice, say, to meditate in those moments, we reinforce that habit energy. And the next time anxiety pops up, it's a little bit easier to meditate or to breathe. It's not like a linear path where it's gonna be easier every time. It's gonna go up and down. It's gonna look like a stock market chart, but our decisions we make in those moments dictate what doors or opportunities we'll have in the future. And then the other piece of karma is we might know about ourselves that, I'm prone to panic or anxiety attacks, or I'm prone to anger, or I'm prone to depression and not wanting to get out of bed, or having apathy. I'm prone to blaming others and being angry with others. I'm prone to, I'm prone to joking when we get into a serious conversation. I'll throw a joke in there because it makes me uncomfortable that things are getting serious. Whatever it may be. I'm prone to feeling better when I get outdoors and take a walk every day, right? They can be kind of positive things. So that second piece of karma, or this kind of the longer term piece, which is what I was talking to Emily about that I love, that she mentioned in her article, was it's not just in the moment what we choose to do, but what are we choosing to do in general, right? What are we doing? What actions are we taking or not taking to promote well-being in general, to promote liberation or relief from suffering? So here's one for me that is, I have so many examples I could give, but here's one for me. I hate tax season. And I doubt there's anyone listening to this who goes, what? I love tax season. Unless maybe you're an accountant. Taxes just stress me out like they do a lot of people. One of the things where we live, we have a few things that come in December, right? We pay our taxes with an extension in October. Then we have November and December. December, we have to buy a bunch of gifts for people, which we don't have to, we choose to. December, we pay aguinaldo, which is like a Christmas bonus to anybody who works with us. December, we have an HOA fee. And then December, we pay our property taxes. So it's like all of this money, we pay our taxes in October, and then in December, we pay all these kind of little different things. And it's stressful. And I don't think I'm the only one. I don't have like a unique set of circumstances. It just can be stressful. I'm 34, and I just started this when I was 32, so 2 years ago. Took me a long time to get here. But I noticed that it was causing me stress or anxiety. I don't even think anxiety is the right word, just like an overwhelming amount of stress. I often didn't actually get anything done, right? Just kind of crippled by the stress of it. So what I started doing was we have an extra bank account, we have 2 checkings account and 2 savings account, and we have that extra savings account that has no money in it. So every month we calculated what that ended up costing, the property tax, the HOA fees, the paying aguinaldo, the Christmas presents, all that stuff. We calculated what we ended up spending. I divided it by 12, and I put it away in that account where I didn't touch it for the whole year. Pretty simple. I know there's a lot of people listening who are probably like, yeah, duh. But I love my parents. Nobody ever taught me that. And it took me a while to learn. It's not my parents' fault, but it took me a while to figure out. what ended up happening was at the end of the year, when those bills came up, we just had the money. And it's a great privilege to be able to put that aside and have the money, I realize, and not everyone's in the same boat. But for us, it relieved so much of my suffering and stress. It's a good example of taking action ahead of time. Yes, when I find myself stressed during tax season and during the holidays with the money going out, I can meditate. I can pause and breathe. I can practice self-compassion. But I also can take action elsewhere in my life to try to mitigate that experience, to try to lessen the power of the stress. Another good example is when my older child was maybe 2, he would come downstairs every morning and want to play with like the big kitchen knife. Like we had one big kitchen knife at the time that was always kind of we were always using, and he always wanted to play with it, and it was always a tantrum. And we, read all the things online. We talked to other parents of like how to deal with a tantrum, and kids that age tantrum. But it was every morning for like a month. So finally I said, we don't need that knife. We have other knives. So I hid that knife away somewhere that he couldn't grab, somewhere that was safe. And it worked. I mean, he still had tantrums about other things, but we avoided that morning tantrum every single day. So this teaching of karma is not just that, what do we do in the moment? What door are we going to open or walk through in the moment? But what actions can we take that will give us the best opportunity? So I want to talk about intention really briefly, because I mentioned earlier that intention is kind of at the core of karma, intentional acts. And I think sometimes we hear that, or when I first heard that, I thought, an intentional act, like a really mindful and present act. And that can be true. But I think it's a little deeper than that. There's things that we do, right, without intentions, just kind of reaction, like not conscious intention. Going back to the example of Elizabeth telling me that I was being a little bit harsh or short with her. When I was short with her, that wasn't an intention consciously, right? She didn't say something to me about the passports, and I thought, I'm just going to be a total jerk about this for no reason. And then I did. It was just a reaction. But I think if we look a little deeper, there is an intention in there, volition or intention in the Buddhist sense. There's a reason I responded that way. I had no idea what it was in the moment. I think that it's partially because I was supposed to book those flights a couple days ago and I still hadn't. They've been booked now. I was supposed to book those flights a few days ago and I hadn't. So when she asked me, I felt a little bit, it's something I often do, right? I procrastinate. So I felt a little bit defensive and wanted to defend myself or responded in a snappy way. There's some intention in there of why that response wasn't born out of nothing. So I think this teaching of karma for me is about looking at those intentions a little bit, those non-conscious intentions. What's feeding, when we look at that kind of relationship between the kleshas or afflictions, some difficulty in the mind, where are we going from? What's happening in the mind that's causing this intention, this kind of craving or aversion, and planting an unwholesome seed? A seed of harshness rather than gentleness. What's happening when you just react with anger to someone and it seems to come out of nowhere? What's the intention there? What's going on? For when we look at that, it's how we begin to kind of identify or get to know what's going on in the mind. And we can begin to work with it. And I think I spent a lot of time kind of talking about difficulties today. But I think it goes the other way as well. By recognizing the wholesome intentions and the wholesome, or I don't want to say good karma, but the karma or actions that are leading us towards more liberation than suffering. What's going on there? What's the intention? I spend a lot of time in the ocean, in the sea here. We live like a few hundred meters from the sea. We spend a lot of time surfing, paddleboarding, snorkeling with the kids, by ourselves. I just love the ocean. And whenever I'm out there and I see a piece of trash in the ocean, I put it in my pocket. I specifically buy like board shorts that have zippered pockets so I can pick up the trash when I'm out there surfing or something. And all the time I have people say something to me of like, why do you do that? Isn't that uncomfortable? Or like, there's like, doesn't really make a difference. And I always think, yeah, like I'm sure it doesn't make a huge difference. Like maybe one animal doesn't eat it and it saves their life. But it's the karma of it for me. It's that I have the opportunity to do something wholesome here. And I'm going to take that opportunity, even if it's inconvenient. I definitely don't just take pieces of trash that come right up to me. Sometimes I have to paddle over to them and grab them. Sometimes they're big enough that I have to take them into shore, back with my stuff, and then paddle back out. But for me, the intention there isn't, I'm going to save the world. The intention isn't, oh, I'm going to do this because someone else is with me. I do it when I'm alone. The intention is, I have an opportunity here to do something very simple that's wholesome. I'm going to do it. It's going to relieve the suffering of some animal, perhaps, or some being. And it's cultivating this wholesome seed in me, the seed of caring about others, the seed of loving kindness. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is a question, I actually haven't received this question myself, but when I do a talk, I often go on Quora or Reddit to see what kind of questions people have about the topic, just to get an idea of what may be useful to discuss. And one of the things I see, and I think the word karma is often not related directly to Buddhism, like people just use it in a general sense. But in general, people asking what about the unexplainable things, right? Like, what about, I'm walking down the street and I get struck by lightning. Like, what did I do to deserve that? And first, we'll go back to what karma is not. It's not linear or deterministic. What you did, to deserve that is a bad phrasing, but what you did that resulted in that was you decided to take a walk at that time. And there happened to be weather that could cause that to happen. It's not your fault or anyone's fault. Karma is not about fault. There's a sutta. I'll include the link in the show notes. There's a sutta where the Buddha says that other things that can kind of cause effects, there's not strictly from our own actions, but we could have, and I'll quote this and explain what they mean: diseases of the bile, diseases of the phlegm, diseases of the wind, a combination, the seasons or climate, unevenness, harsh treatment. So there's other things that can cause, right, these effects. The bile, phlegm, and wind are the humors. It was their understanding of medicine and illness at the time. I think bile was generally seen as gallbladder disease or intestinal disease. Wind was the lungs and breathing. Phlegm, I think, was the, mucusy kind of diseases. And I think those are really good examples, right? Like, we might feel a little bit anxious or a little bit off center or not ourselves if we're sick. It's not necessarily our fault. There's something we can do about it. Maybe we can take medicine, or maybe we can rest, or maybe we can be extra mindful of the fact that we're being short with people or we're anxious. The seasons. It's not your fault that you're colder in winter than you are in summer. There's definitely karma there. If it is winter, we can take the action of putting a coat on, and take the action in summer of not putting a coat on. But all of this is to say that karma isn't kind of the end-all be-all. Not everything is karma. Sometimes we experience things that are simply out of our control, and we have to work with them. There's also, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, there's also some complexity to karma, right? One of the examples that the Buddha gives in the suttas is asceticism, or being a monk. When one joins the monastic life, it's generally accepted that it's not pleasant or pleasurable right off the bat. It can be rather difficult. There can be lots of craving and clinging and aversion. You may not feel good. But that doesn't make it bad karma. Not that there's such thing. But that doesn't make it suffering karma. Or sometimes the decisions we make may feel uncomfortable in the immediate term, and in the long run lead to more liberation or more outcomes that we want. The opposite can be true. I procrastinate. That's putting off things for a kind of immediate pleasure, right? Oh, I'm not going to deal with it right now. I'm going to do something else. That immediate kind of freedom. But then it causes stress down the line. When I have something that I need to do and should have been done a week ago, it causes this stress. So I do think we need to drop this understanding of karma as just good or bad, or just suffering or liberation. We can drop this idea of karma being absolutely responsible for everything and deterministic, and instead just consider the question of, where is this action leading me? So a few kind of reflections or questions you can ask yourself, and I'll include these in the show notes as well. First, look at the places where we're experiencing suffering or liberation and take intentional actions, right? Maybe you can think in your head or jot down a point today or yesterday or this week where you really experienced some level of suffering or dis-ease. It could have been a difficult conversation, some stress at work, a difficult moment with your children, whatever it may be. And also write down, or think about a moment in which you experienced some ease, some happiness or joy. Maybe it was taking a walk. Maybe it was listening to your favorite piece of music. Maybe it was falling in bed and relaxing at the end of a day. And you can ask yourselves with these things, what intentional actions can I take to either plant more of this seed or stop planting this seed? So what's something that is causing you suffering, or maybe you're causing suffering to others? Could be something in the present that you're experiencing right now, something from the last week. What can you do to work with that? Is there a behavior or action you can take today or even regularly to kind of rectify it. I'll give an example is I've been a little bit anxious or stressed recently because I have a bunch of little projects going on. I do the website for Elizabeth's private practice and all the kind of marketing pieces for it. I have my own job in finance, and then I do a bunch of stuff with students and the One Mind Dharma and Mindful Counselor website. And then, I mix in the students or clients I see during the day. It's just a lot of little stuff. And and on top of that, I was not getting stuff done, is what I noticed. I was leaving stuff till the last minute and stressing myself out and working later than I wanted to and not seeing my kids as much as I wanted to. And so I did something that I used to do a long time ago when I used to work in marketing full-time. And I set up a kind of CRM or scheduler. I put all my tasks in there that I had to complete, and I spaced them out so it was much more manageable. So on Monday, I just have these couple things to do. On Tuesday, I'm going to get these couple things done. Wednesday, and so on. So seeing that I was suffering or experiencing disease over something, the karma there is I'm going to take action, intentional action, to lessen that. And it's worked. I'm not free from anxiety or stress 100%. But it's definitely freed me from it quite a bit. And we can ask ourselves the same or reflect in the same way with something more pleasant or wholesome. What's something that is pleasurable or wholesome or supportive to your well-being, mental, physical, emotional? What can you do to encourage that or plant healthy seeds? One of those things for me is having the opportunity to go surfing with Elizabeth, with my wife. We go with friends and I go with other people. But when it's just the two of us out there and no one else in the water, and we catch waves, the same wave together, like right next to each other, I absolutely love that. We haven't done it in a while. There haven't really been a ton of waves. We were on vacation visiting Elizabeth's family. So what can I do to make sure that, not to crave and cling and I'll only be happy if I do that, but what can I do to achieve that or work towards that or make that door open to me? And there's a few things. One, keep my body healthy, right? Just because we're not surfing doesn't mean I can't work on keeping my body healthy, and lots of stretching and mobility. Handling my own work and tasks, making sure I get my stuff done so I'm able to go out and do that. Keeping the kids on a schedule. We go surf during the kids' nap time and someone hangs out at the house. So there's actions we can take instead of just longing for I really enjoy that. It feels really wholesome and connecting with my partner and being outside and exercising, but I just don't have time or my body's not up for it. I can actually take action to encourage the availability of that for me. So the question I would ask you is, what can you do today, right now, today, maybe a daily habit, to impact the doors you have available tomorrow, next week? What intentional actions can you take that will influence the future in a way that is conducive to your well-being? Can think of your future self as you would think of any other being. Can you have loving kindness and gentleness for your future self by acting in a way, even when it takes some effort, that is conducive to that being's happiness? So that is what I have to offer today. I went a little bit over time. I apologize. You can check the show notes on your podcast player or visit oneminddharma.com to find them. It'll be the most recent post. I'm going to put some links in there, the article from Emily about somatic exercises, the suttas I mentioned, just because I think they're interesting, and a few other resources. And again, if you have any questions, you can email me at matthew@oneminddharma.com. If you're interested in one-on-one sessions, mindfulness counseling, or meditation coaching, you can visit themindfulcounselor.me or oneminddharma.com/coaching. I do only have a few spots available. And if you have a topic or anything you want me to cover or anything at all, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.